As we wave goodbye to summer and say hello to fall, that can only mean one thing: wintertime's coming. Sure, y'all are curious as to what we could expect this winter, and to forecast anything out over 2 weeks is virtually impossible, let alone 2 months from now. But with the data I'm about to present, this will give us a basic understanding of what we could possibly expect. And as we look down here at the ENSO, basically the El Nino Southern Oscillation, it determines our El Nino and La Nina patterns. We can see we are currently entering an El Nino year, and this means unusually warm waters down by the Pacific. Now this is a stark contrast to what we had last year, which was a La Nina, and this is what a La Nina is: a high blocking high pressure over here, which means colder air here and wetter conditions much of this area and drier air here. Now last winter we dealt with a major cold snap right around Christmas time, and we had a lot of snowfall over by Buffalo, which in hindsight wasn't that bad of a winter, but it was still a winter for the record books as we had a major cold snap by Christmas time. Now this year, we're entering a pretty strong El Nino, as you can see the model averages, and this is what we can expect during an El Nino pattern. We can expect the tropical jet to be pushed further north, and that pushes the polar jet further north as well, which means warmer air up by Canada, wetter conditions down by the southwestern part of the country. Now y'all may wonder, how the heck does warm waters and cold waters, La Nina, El Nino affect the homeland? Well, first and foremost, let's take a look at this graphic. This is an El Nino graphic, but it works for both La Nina and El Nino, because La Nina is the opposite of this graphic here. As y'all know, warm air rises, cold air sinks. So you can see right here where the El Nino is at, we have some warm air rising and causing some clouds, while over here we have the air condensing, which that's why we're expecting wetter conditions out here, because we're expecting some storms to just progress over this area over and over and over. Now the last time we had a strong El Nino was back in the 2009 and 2010 winter season. Now of course our last technical El Nino was back in 2014 and 15. Of course that El Nino is not as strong as what's projected this year. As we take a look back to the 2009 and 2010 winter season, we can see we had a polar vortex stretching down and affecting much of the homeland, which brought some really frigid air that year. As we take a look back to 2014 and 15, we can see that we still had frigid air for the eastern part of the country and warmer air out west, but we didn't have that polar vortex that stretched across most of the country. And of course, forgot to mention that El Nino and La Nina patterns change every 1 to 3 years. And y'all may wonder, what is a polar vortex? And we can see the science behind that here. Here on the right, we have a weaker polar vortex. On the left, we have a stronger and more stable polar vortex. Of course, this year is projected to be more of a weaker polar vortex due to some warmer air moving north because of an El Nino pattern. And as soon as warmer air touches the polar vortex, it sort of weakens it down, and that's how we get our polar vortex to stretch south and affect the homeland and bring really frigid air to us. Of course, last year we had a La Nina pattern, which didn't affect the polar vortex any, which led to a more stable and strong polar vortex. Now, of course, we had that cold snap that affected us right around Christmas time, but that has no correlation to the polar vortex any. And of course, we can see the different layers of the polar vortex. We have the tropospheric layer and we have the stratospheric layer. Of course, the tropospheric layer is what we feel here at the surface, and of course, the stratosphere is up there by the ozone. And y'all may wonder how this even works, and how does the warm air affect the tropospheric and stratospheric layers of the polar vortex. And to determine that, we have to take a look at the QBO. We are currently in the easterly phase, and we were in that in 2009-2010. How the QBO works and what it is basically it's stratospheric winds down by the equator. It transfers that warm El Nino air up here to northern Canada, and that warm air touches the Arctic where that polar vortex is, weakens it down, of course, and then it brings that cold air down to the homeland. We can see the east minus west map. You can see positive QBO and the negative QBO. The positive is the westerlies, which we experienced last year, and we have the negative, which is what we're going to be experiencing this year. And this is going to push that air towards the Arctic and weaken down the polar vortex, as I stated earlier. And of course, as we look here on the Euro, they're projecting warmer Arctic air, which is going to weaken down the polar vortex. And now as we take a look at the North Atlantic Oscillation, that's another factor in the polar vortex, as we are currently in a positive NAO, which is going to turn negative as we head into the later parts of winter. And as we take a look over here on this model, we can see we have a high pressure which is projected to set up over Greenland. And that's why they're projecting a negative NAO, which means colder air is projected for much of the central and eastern part of the country. So that's another factor in the polar vortex. Basically, the QBO, this warm area here, is going to weaken down the polar vortex, and this NAO is going to transfer that cold air due to the high pressure. It's going to transfer it to much of the central and eastern part of the country. And so we can see that these models are in agreement with that, with colder air being funneled down into the central and eastern part of the country. Now to shift gears here, we're going to talk about the snowfall forecast. We can see that although we're expecting cold air to stretch along much of the central and eastern part of the country later this winter, as far as the snowfall goes, it's still very uncertain at this point, but it looks like below average snowfall is projected for much of the country except for the central part and the southern part from Texas on over into the Carolinas. But still, just take this forecast with a grain of salt, as this is a couple months out from now. And according to NOAA, the precipitation outlook is in agreement with that, although much of California up into Massachusetts and even over here in northern Alaska, y'all are going to be expecting above average precip. And of course, this is going to be due to multiple storms traversing over the same area over and over and over this winter due to a low pressure system that's going to be coming through. And of course, up here from Washington over to New York, you're going to be expecting some below average precip, and even down here by Hawaii as well. And of course, this up here is due to a high pressure system that's going to be setting up, and of course, as I stated earlier, it's going to weaken down that polar vortex. As far as temperatures go, the reason why they're saying we're having equal chances for temperatures, which means about normal, is because we're still very uncertain at this point. Although it says below average temperatures expected over here in New Mexico and Arizona, this could potentially shift over here to the eastern part of the country. And according to the CONSTRUCTIve model, this is the Canadian winter forecast model, we can see that by February, we're expecting a polar vortex to come down and really affect much of the central and eastern part of the country. While the western part over here, y'all gonna be getting into on some warmer than normal temperatures. And of course, as we look at this model here, this is from December to February. Looks like we're gonna be experiencing about the same. So as far as the winter forecast goes for this year, it looks like the beginning part of winter, much of the country is going to be getting off to a slow start. As we head into the meat and potatoes of wintertime, it looks like really frigid air is going to be setting in due to a potential weakening down of the polar vortex. And here at Willie's Weather, if we get any snowstorms here in Indiana, at the Willie's Weather headquarters, I will be out reporting on it, doing ASLIs, and I'll even get my drone up in the air as well to shoot some snowfall. So look forward to that this year. And of course, they'll most likely be naming winter storms just like they name poops. This is ridiculous. And if you're out there traveling this year on the roads, make sure you pack that safety kit with you and be careful. Don't worry about getting hurt out there on the roads. Don't worry about getting stuck. And again, just take this forecast with a grain of salt. This is still pretty far out, and I will most likely have another forecast video out, or I will have an update on X, formerly known as Twitter. I'll link that description down below. Go check that out. So if you like the video, please hit that thumbs up button. Don't forget to subscribe down below, and make sure you go follow my Rumble channel as well. I have uploads up on Rumble, so make sure you go follow that. Constructive feedback is always appreciated. I appreciate each and every one of y'all for tuning in. And until next time, never stop forecasting.